I also want to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to share some of my views about the institutional foundation of China's economic growth. I'm really glad that I'm given this opportunity to reunite with my former professor, Andrew Musclell. And as most of you must have known, China's economy has been growing very rapidly over the last 35 years. Since 1978 to now, the average growth rate was just below 10% on annual basis. But probably by most of these standards, China doesn't have very good institutions. And both economic institutions and political institutions. Then the puzzle is, how can you achieve such economic growth given the lack of good institutions? And today, I would like to share with you some of the stories that I have observed in the course of China's economic growth. Hopefully, through those stories, we can see some clues to the question that I just posed. I don't know how to control. Okay, got it. And some of you might know there's this book, very influential book written by Acemoglu and Robinson, Why Nations Fail. In the book, they emphasize very much the importance of institutions. And actually, in the book, they cited this example from China. I'm going to start off with this example. This is an example of a steel company. There was this private entrepreneur. He ran a very small, relatively small steel plant in the city of Changzhou in Jiangsu province. Then he thought that there are better opportunities because as a private entrepreneur, his firm was much more efficient than some of the state-owned steel plants. He thought that if the market worked, then his more efficient plant would survive very well, would perform very well in the market. Then somehow, he convinced the local government officials, especially the Communist Party secretary of the city, to sponsor his plan to build a huge steel plant. As an entrepreneur, everybody knows you have to have the help of the local government in order to pull off such a big, large-scale investment. For example, you need to have the land. For a large, modern steel plant, you need to have the land. You need to have electricity, and you need to have transportation available to you. But somehow he convinced the local government to support him. So the local government officials helped him to acquire the land. Another difficulty faced by these private entrepreneurs is to get funding, because the state banks usually don't make large sums of loans to private firms. In his case, he needed 10 billion yuan. That's 1.3 billion US dollars. That's a huge sum for a private entrepreneur, which was not very large. But somehow, again, he convinced the local government official to support him. So the local government official helped him to convince the local branch of Bank of China to lend him the money. Then he also needed approval because the investment project was very big. So it had to be approved by a very important government agency, that is the National Development and Reform Commission, NDRC. And, but it was really difficult to get the approval for a private entrepreneur. Even the local government had difficulties convincing NDRC to grant them the approval. So what did they do? They got very smart. They broke the project into 28 pieces. Each piece will be small enough so that the approval by the central government would not be needed. The provincial government would be able to grant the approval. So everything looked rosy. The land was acquired, bank loan was secured, approval, although they didn't get the approval they wanted, but they got something that's close enough. Okay? What happened? They started building this plant in 2003, and less than a year later, the central government came down, and the central government ordered the closure of the building of this steel plant. It was 60% finished, but it was stopped. Now that piece of land is just sitting there. All the equipment has become obsolete, and so it was a big loss, not only for this private entrepreneur, it was also a big loss for the bank, which made the loan available to this firm. And it was also a loss for the local government officials. Some of the officials were censured by the Communist Party, by the central government, because they helped this entrepreneur to sort of break the rule. And if this is the most common story in China, then people become very pessimistic. Actually, a lot of people are very pessimistic. If you join a discussion of economists in China, most of the time, 90% of the time, you will hear people discussing all kinds of problems. You will become very pessimistic after you hear all those discussions. But then you look at those numbers, the growth numbers, then you realize maybe there's something else going on. Okay, so this story seems to suggest that there's no protection of property right. This private entrepreneur got the loan from the bank. He also invested his own money into the project. Then the government just took it away, ordered it stopped. Why? One explanation was that if this plant was built, it will become a fierce competitor to another state-owned steel plant that's about 50 miles away. So the story is the state-owned steel plant sort of convinced the regulator to shut down this competitor. And this is one example. Then if you look at these numbers, the World Bank does a report called Doing Business. Every year, they issue this report. They ask lawyers to read the regulations of different countries. They ask accountants to actually trying to start a business and to see how costly it is to start a business. So using all these methodology, they come up with a ranking. They rank 10 different areas of the potential problems a firm may face in the course of their business. And according to such ranking, China fares poorly. And overall ranking, China ranked 91st place. Okay, it's 2 places above Guatemala, 3 places above Zambia. And then I just look at the ranking. I thought these examples are interesting. Tunisia is ranked 50, 41 place ahead of China. Our 2 neighbors, Kazakhstan and Mongolia, they all are ranked higher than China. Then there are 10 different subcategories. And in most of these important subcategories, China ranked very poorly. Starting a business is very difficult. We are ranked 151st place. And dealing with construction permit is even more difficult. We are almost ranked at the very bottom. And then getting electricity is difficult. Protecting investors, as that story cited by Asimoglu and Robinson illustrates, it's terrible. And paying taxes, firms pay very high taxes, etc. So things look very bleak. I'm going to tell you some other stories that hopefully will help us make sense of some of these contradictions. There is another private entrepreneur who was trying to do a similar thing as this first person was doing. This first person wanted to go to the steel industry. The second one wanted to go to the aluminum industry. Both of these industries, they all started in the about 10 years ago. And at that time, the construction industry was booming, so a lot of these raw materials were in high demand. So this private entrepreneur wanted to go into the aluminum industry, but that industry was dominated, almost completely dominated by this huge state-owned corporation. It's called Canolco, China Alumina Corporation. It had 98% of market share. 98% of market share. When this state-owned firm went public, the government, in order to help this firm to sell its shares, the government granted mining rights, almost all the mining rights to this firm. So there was also China's aluminum ore, bauxite, was of low grades. International technology doesn't work with this kind of material. So this firm had a monopoly over the technology that can be used to extract aluminum from the local ore, local mine. So it had monopoly over the mines, it had monopoly over the technology, it had 98% of the market share. There seemed to be no chance for any private firm to break into that industry. But this entrepreneur is not a usual entrepreneur. And this entrepreneur this East Hope group, the founder of this East Hope group started in 1981 by selling quail eggs. Then later, the family business, there are a few brothers. The brothers sold pig feet. They became rich. They had money. But then the brothers had quarrels among themselves. So they broke up the family company. And this brother, Liu Yongxin, wanted to go to into the aluminum industry. So he is currently the 6th richest person in China, according to a certain ranking. But he wanted to go to the aluminum industry, as I just explained. It was very difficult. How did he do that? 60% of the aluminum reserve were located in this one province, Henan province. And the big state monopoly was a central government-owned company. It was one of the 50 biggest central government-owned, state-owned company. But the local government had no stake in this company. And this monopolist wanted to restrict the supply to the market so that they can sell at high price. The problem is local governments are very short of cash. They want to sell as much of their aluminum reserves as possible, but this downstream aluminum maker didn't want to sell so much. So this is the opportunity saw by this private entrepreneur. So he went to this city, Sanmenxia city. He talked to the party secretary in that city. He said that if I build a plant here, I will buy a lot of aluminum ore from you. Somehow he convinced the local government. And they helped him to secure the permit. He's rich by himself, so he didn't need to get bank loan. So financing is solved. Permit is helped by this local government. The national monopoly was very unhappy. Every step of the way, they fought. they tried to prevent this private entrepreneur from investing in this industry. But somehow the local government helped all the way. So he succeeded. The problem is how did he get the technology? I said that earlier. There was a monopoly over the technology in getting aluminum from the local mine. A few of the engineers working for the national monopoly, they were very unhappy about their pay. So somehow they broke away from their former employer. They set up their own research institute, doing research on the technology for aluminum. Then they sold the technology to any private entrepreneur who are willing to pay. So Mr. Liu got the technology from these engineers who broke away from their former employers. Later, these engineers were convicted for intellectual property right violation. But before they were convicted, this entrepreneur got the technology. So they had everything. They had technology, they had financing, they had land, they had everything. So they succeeded. They are now still prospering. 3 years after their investment, the national monopoly's market share dropped from 98% to below 50%. Not only this private firm succeeded, other firms also succeeded in the industry. So this example seems to suggest that with the right kind of strategy, working together with the local government, if you are very careful, actually in the process, there are a lot of obstacles due to the lack of time, so I'm not going to go into details. So this entrepreneur maneuvered every step of the way from all the mines that lay ahead of their path. So this is one example. And what this entrepreneur concludes is that, forgive me for being frank, but local officials, even corrupt ones, all need to have political achievements. That's how he succeeded, using the incentive of local officials to achieve political goals, to succeed. Incidentally, at that time, the party secretary of the province is the current prime minister. I don't know whether he had anything to do with that, but this entrepreneur worked with the city officials, not the provincial officials, but that was, I just want to mention this coincidence. Then there is another story. This story is sort of, this firm is not private. It's a local government-owned, state-owned enterprise. It's an automaker. As you know, China didn't have an auto industry for very long, and most of the firms, most of the cars running on Chinese streets are foreign brands. But there's this one city in the province of Anhui, city of Wuhu. It's a very remote city. It has very poor industrial base, but the party secretary has big ambitions. He wanted to build an auto industry in that city. Again, he is running against huge obstacles, because to have an auto plant, to sell automobiles in the Chinese market, you have to have central government approval. You need to have quotas from the central government to sell automobiles to the market. The city applied for the quota year and a year. It was not granted, the quota. So this Communist Party secretary wanted to take some risk. He said that if I'm not allowed to build automobiles, would I be allowed to build engines for the automobiles? And there was this opportunity. A British plant, engine plant, was closing down because it was not doing well. So the assembly line was up for sales. So this city of Wuhu purchased this assembly plant. Initially, the British engineers were responsible for reassembling the plant in Wuhu, but they were working very slowly. And the city government was very unhappy. They had to make a decision, either to let the British engineers to continue to do it and at a very slow pace, or do something else. So they looked and looked. They found this local son who worked in a big state automobile company. He was a plant manager in that company. He had expertise. So this party secretary personally convinced this manager of a big state-owned company to leave the state-owned company and work for him, for this local plant. So this guy somehow was convinced. Then he came, and the first big risk he took was to dismiss all the British engineers. Then he himself, with another team of local engineers, did the reassembly of the engine plant. But that was not the end. They wanted to sell automobile instead of engines. So what did they do? First, the city officials lobbied the central government. The central government was not budging. Then they say, suppose we don't sell automobiles we produce in the national market. We just sell it on the local market. Would you agree? Then this party official also get help from a godfather in the politics. And somehow the central planner agreed for them to build this plant, then sell automobiles only in the city. That city is a small city in Chinese standard. It's about 1.5 million people. You cannot sustain an automobile plant with 1.5 million population, especially when the population was still very poor at that time. But the local government forced all the local taxi drivers to purchase from this plant. Well, that's within their power. They did that. Then they started the plant. They bought their assembly plant from Spain. It was SEAT. I don't know whether that rings a bell or not. At that time, it was not doing well. So the assembly line was purchased by the city. It's moved to Wuhu, and this guy helped the city to assemble the plant, and it was producing. The car was a copycat of Jetta. The intellectual property right was of no concern to them. So they built the plant. They sold it to the local taxi drivers. But obviously, they have to lose a lot of money doing that. Again, they try to lobby. So here is, the characters are too small, and you probably cannot read it. But two things they did that helped them. First of all, they again go to the godfather in Beijing. And somehow the godfather helped them to convince one of the state-owned companies to take them on. How did they do? What do they mean by take them on? They give 20% of their share for free to a state-owned automobile company which had the license to sell automobiles in the national market. So this was the price they paid. So they gave away 20% of the share. And now they have the license to sell the automobile. Then the next year, they came up with another model of the car, which was exactly identical to the GM car that was jointly produced with this state-owned company that received 20% of the share for free. So they were up and running. Now they are the largest local automobile producer in China. And they are also the largest exporter of cars in China. So that's another story here. Again, here, the help from the local government. Here, even the help from the political connections to the central government played a central role. And this state-owned company that helped them to get the license to sell, they had a joint venture with General Motors. They also had a joint venture with Volkswagen. But they were under political pressure to help this local company, which they did. Now they may regret it, but that was the story. Okay, so in all these cases, there were involvements of local government. So that's how it seemed that they sort of secured the protection of property right, because the local government was behind them. But this is another story that had no government role behind it. And it's also very interesting. If anything, they were also up against a lot of obstacles. The name of the company is called Tencent. It's a funny name. I don't know why it is called that name. Probably it's, well, they were a competitor to the telecommunication companies. The telecommunication companies charge 10 cents for each short message consumers send. So they sort of help consumers save that 10 cents. That was my take of why they choose this name. It has no truth to it. There was this recent story in Time magazine. It's called, What's All the Fuss About WhatsApp? We all know that Facebook spent $19 billion to purchase this company, WhatsApp. It's a web-based, Wi-Fi-based communications, social networking sort of firm. This firm has no foreign investment in it. It has no government stake in it, but it is extremely successful. If you compare, the Time article compared the service of the main service provided by Tencent, which is called WeChat, to WhatsApp. It seems that WeChat has there are a lot of advantages. There are a lot of very interesting features that WeChat has, which WhatsApp don't have. One of the very interesting features is that if you go to, suppose you are sitting here, you are bored with my talk, you want to know who is interested in talking to you, you just take off your cell phone and shake it. You will know who's in the network, who are in this room. Then you send them, actually, if you find out them, you will also see a picture. So if they are attractive enough to you, you send them a message, then they may reply, they may not. There are some chances that they will. I don't know how much damage it does to marriage in China, but it's really successful commercially. Compared to WhatsApp, WhatsApp makes $1 a year from each customer they have. And there was an estimate that Tencent makes $7 a year from each customer they have. They have a lot of customers. They have 400 million customers. It's a huge, huge company. So the market value, it's not public listed firm. The estimated market value of that firm is $30 billion, which is higher than that of WhatsApp. How did this, it seems that this firm is very successful. Did it have any problems? Of course they did. One of the problems they had was this one. In March 31st last year, the Minister of Industry and Information Technology went to a conference, and at the conference he made a public speech. He said that this Tencent would probably have to charge their customers. Now they offer their WeChat service for free. they make their money through other ways, not through directly charging the consumers. But that's very bad for their, for their competitors. The state-owned telecom companies were very unhappy because they offer their services for free. So customers are leaving the state-owned companies in droves. So they complained to the government regulator. So that's why this minister came out and saying this company may have to charge a fee. The minister says that it's only reasonable for a market-based firm to charge for their service. Otherwise, it's not reasonable. On the same day, the spokesperson for this firm told the official Xinhua news agency that they would never charge a fee for basic services from their customers. How can they resist this minister, this hugely powerful ministry, which are regulating their industry? It's their customers. Because there are 400 million customers, they all enjoy the service for free. When a government tries to force this company to charge a fee, you know the customers are not going to be very happy. So there was a survey done on April 4th, just 4 days after the announcement made by the minister. The survey found that 90% of the customers threatened that if a fee was charged, they will leave the service. They will not use the service. And it worked. So far, the government has not been able to force this firm to charge that fee. So this is another story here. Would the government, actually the internet business in China is almost completely dominated by private firms. This Tencent is one of the biggest. The other, Alibaba, was another very big firm. Alibaba is applying for IPO in New York, and it's estimated that it's going to be the biggest IPO in the history of New York Stock Exchange. Then there are, in almost all areas of the internet business, private firms dominate. It doesn't mean the government was not trying to dominate the sector. It did try. Another example here. Renmin Daily is the Communist Party mouthpiece. It's the most, well, it's the most authoritative official government newspaper. It runs a website, and they want to build a search engine for that website. So in 2010, the test version was launched, and then they appointed this celebrity, Ms. Deng Yaping. She was, for 8 years consecutively, she was the top female ping pong player in the world. Somehow, the government thought of appointing her to run this business. After 1 billion yuan was invested in that project, November last year, the search engine ceased to provide service. So the government did try, but fared very poorly. What's the lesson we can learn from that? So if we have any takeaways from these stories, I would like to summarize them. Maybe not perfect. I would welcome comments. First of all, formal property rights protection is really poor. There are laws, but the enforcement of laws are not so strict, and no one can challenge the government. There is no constitutional court in China, so no one can challenge the government. And businesses face many difficulties. They need approval to carry out an investment. They need land. They need financing. All these things are difficult to get. But local governments can help. Why they are so interested in helping entrepreneurs to achieve their goal? Because there is strong local competition among provinces. Also, their political career depends on the economic success of the region. So that's why they are interested in helping. And they are very capable in helping as well. State capacity is very important here. Even if formal protection didn't work, there are de facto protection. If you want to take away a business, the business may fail immediately. In the case of the internet companies, I don't think the government will be foolish enough to take away any company, because the minute they do that, you will see that sort of a death penalty to the company. So customers may help you to resist government pressure, and some businesses are more difficult to expropriate than others, as in the case of internet companies. So although formal institutions are not there, formal protection of property rights are not perfect, but there are different ways to get around things at the moment. If we look into the future, are these informal arrangements going to work all the time? We don't know. There are a lot of limitations to these alternative sort of institutions. When local government competes, one of the consequences is that environmental problems may become very bad. When all provinces want to build their steel plant, you will have a lot of steel plant, and there's going to be pollution, and there's going to be overcapacity. Actually, steel industry and aluminum industry are all in huge overcapacity problems. And de facto protection. In some cases, these informal protection works. In other cases, they don't. For example, there is no one single pharmaceutical firm in China that's very successful. Because for pharmaceutical industry, if you invent something, if your formula is leaked, then you are doomed. For internet business, you needed to adapt to the market change all the time. So there is no secret formula. The formula is embedded in the entrepreneur. So if you take away their business fails. If you take away a pharmaceutical company, the company can still work, but the entrepreneur would suffer. So there are certain industries that work, other industries that don't. So that's why these informal mechanisms works in some cases, it doesn't in other cases. And protect state capacity, strong state capacity. The local government can use the capacity to help you. It can also use the capacity to destroy you. They are very capable of setting up competitors to your business if you don't cooperate with them. So we have a mixed bag here. These arrangements seem to have helped in the last 35 years or so. But looking into the future, things are becoming more complicated. Are they going to still work? We don't know. So we are at the crossroads. We cannot be the copycat forever. And we need to develop our own technology, new technology. For internet business, we are doing fine now. For other industries, we have a long way to go. Finally, a postscript. The first story I just told about, the entrepreneur's name was Dai Guofang. He was arrested. He was put in jail for 5 years. Recently, he started a new business. He started a new business in the nickel iron alloy industry. He made, again, 10 billion yuan of investment. He is now the largest producer of nickel iron alloy in China. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you.